the early Middle Ages, Christianity has just one voice in Europe. However, the emergence of the Renaissance in the 14th century introduces a new intellectual movement, humanism. Based around the rediscovery of the classical texts from the ancient world, the education of boys is transformed and now includes grammar, rhetoric, history, and moral philosophy. Education for daughters is seen as largely irrelevant, since women are excluded from civic and public life. Moreover, humanism perpetuates the classical view of female inferiority. For women in the Middle Ages, education is both the problem and the solution.
It was in this context that a truly exceptional woman, the first ever self-consciously feminist writer, picked up her pen in defense of her sex. It was here, in 15th century Paris, that she dared to ask the question, what does it mean to be a woman? She was writing half a century before the printing press, in an age where most women are illiterate. She is Christine de Pizan, one of my personal heroines.
Born in Venice in 1364, Christine came to Paris at the age of 4, when her father, a respected astrologer, was appointed to the court of Charles V of France.
Christine grew up in one of the most cultured and privileged places in all of Europe. And her father, and probably Christine herself, had access to Charles V's extensive library, which is housed here in the Louvre.
Despite her mother's reservations, having an academic and liberally minded father meant that Christine enjoyed a rare and extensive education. While this was a privilege beyond most women at the time, for Christine, learning wasn't a luxury. It became her only way to survive. I believe that education is one of the most vital factors in determining a woman's opportunities. And it's as true today as it was in the past that you can judge a society by how it educates its women. Christine, as one of the very few educated women in her own time, was painfully aware of the crippling effects that enforced ignorance has on women, depriving them of the tools of expression and excluding them from the world of ideas. When her father and then her husband died, leaving Christine a single mother of 3 children and without financial support, she began writing professionally, selling her love poems to wealthy patrons. A lone female voice, she was writing at a time when poetry was, almost by definition, male. All of you are, were, or will be whores, whether by intention or action. This is a famous line from the Roman de la Rose, one of the most popular works in the entire medieval period. In theory, it's a poem about courtly love, but in practice it spewed out prevailing notions about women being immoral, deceitful, and sexually voracious. As a child of the Renaissance, Christine was appalled. Humanism, though no supporter of women's rights, encouraged that everything should be questioned. She confronted the scholars who defended the Romance of the Rose, forcing them to debate with her on the true nature of woman. In 1405, she wrote her great revisionist history of women, The City of Ladies, commissioning the best female illustrator in Paris to illuminate it. I am meeting medieval literature specialist Anne Popin at the National Library of France to see one of the only 8 remaining copies of this revolutionary book. What was Christine trying to do when she wrote this book?
It's a kind of manifesto for the defense of women, but also to prove all the good things that women have done. She was trying, I think, to have people be conscious of all what women could do if they were given the opportunity and if they were taking the opportunity and getting some education and doing things themselves, contrary to what men of her time said. And that's how actually the book starts. She's sitting in her study and she happens to read a book that says very bad things about women. It's an anti-feminist book, as there were many of them in 14th and 15th century. And Christine reads it for fun, she thinks, and then she thinks it's not funny, and she's desperate. And as she's desperate, she sees three ladies who come to her for reason, rectitude and justice, who tell her, we will build something to defend women, to protect women, but also to show how important women have been in the history of humanity. On the next picture, you see Christine helping Lady Reason to build a big defense wall with brick. All the bricks are famous women who did great things. Women who have governed, who have fought, who have worked in sciences, in arts, in all kinds of domains. She gives women something on which they can rely to build for their own life.
The City of Ladies seems to be a defense against misogyny, in that life will be different for women inside this particular city. Is that right?
Yeah, there is one passage actually which is very striking because it sounds very modern in a way. Christine talks to Rectitude and tells her, I am troubled and grieved when men argue that many women want to be raped and that it doesn't bother them at all to be raped by men, even if they verbally protest. It would be hard to believe that such great villainy is actually pleasant for them. And Rectitude, of course, answers, no, this is all lies, and you know it. And the conclusion of this chapter is even more striking. Rectitude states, a man would be executed for raping a woman, a law which is fitting, just, and holy. She says things which are very new and very shocking at that time.
For me, Christine is the uncrowned queen of the Renaissance. Her literary genius was recognized in her own lifetime, and her manuscripts were copied and translated across Europe. However, her work was forgotten until the 1970s, when feminist writers rediscovered her through Simone de Beauvoir's book, The Second Sex.